Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a Supreme Court decision that was delivered with some serious speed, and it tackles a question that gets right to the heart of how our legal system works. So, here's the big question, right? Can a state just decide your federal rights don't apply anymore? This is the core issue in the recent case, Doe versus dynamic physical therapy. And yeah, it's a classic showdown between state power and federal authority.
Okay, let's dive into the specifics here. This whole thing kicked off because of a direct, head-on collision between two different laws, one from a state and one from the federal government.
So on one side, you have this Louisiana law. It gives healthcare providers complete immunity from lawsuits during a public health crisis. You can see why they do that. But on the other side, you have a federal law that explicitly gives a person the right to file a lawsuit for certain claims. You can't have both, right? They are in total conflict. A Louisiana court took a look and sided with the state. It ruled that its immunity law was strong enough to completely block the plaintiff's federal claims. Now, this was a huge deal because it basically suggested a state could just switch off a federal law it didn't like, setting the stage for a major constitutional fight. So, this lands on the Supreme Court's desk. And how did they respond to this direct challenge? Well, their answer was, let's just say, it was loud and clear. The court's answer came in what's called a per curiam opinion. Now, what does that mean? It means it was short, it was unanimous, and nobody even signed it. In the world of the Supreme Court, that is the legal equivalent of a mic drop. It signals that the issue was so obvious, it didn't even need a big debate. And the entire ruling really boils down to this one single powerful sentence you see right here. The court couldn't have been clearer. A state can decide who gets sued under its own laws, sure, but it has zero power to build a shield against a federal lawsuit. So, the bottom line, the Louisiana court's decision was toast, completely and totally overturned. The case got sent back down with some very clear instructions. You cannot push a federal law to the side just because of a state statute. So, you might be wondering, why was the court so unified on this, so certain? Well, the answer isn't hiding in some obscure legal text. It's actually one of the most fundamental principles in the entire U.S. Constitution. It all comes down to this, the Supremacy Clause. You can think of this clause as the bedrock of our whole federal system. It flat out states that federal laws are the supreme law of the land. And what that means in the real world is super simple. If a state law and a federal law get into a fight, federal law wins. Every single time. This is what ensures we have one national legal system, not 50 different ones. Now, this ruling might just look like the Supreme Court correcting one lower court's error, but trust me, the implications for the whole country are absolutely enormous. To really get why this matters so much, let's just play a little what-if game. What would our legal world look like if that Louisiana court's decision had actually been upheld? It would have been total chaos. You'd have a system where your federal rights could literally vanish the second you crossed a state line. It would let states just opt out of any federal law they disagree with, which would completely shatter the whole idea of being a unified nation under a single set of federal laws. All right, now for our talk trials analysis. We're going to step back and offer our own judgment on this outcome from that 10th chair perspective. So, adopting our analytical framework, we're taking a step back to really assess the absolute legal necessity of this ruling. And our conclusion is pretty clear. This was the only way this could have gone, period. A unanimous, fast reversal wasn't just the right call. It was an essential move to protect the entire federal system. Honestly, any other decision would have been a constitutional earthquake. It would have completely dismantled the Supremacy Clause, basically turning federal law into a list of polite suggestions that states could just ignore. So, the ultimate takeaway here is pretty straightforward. States have a ton of power to make their own laws and grant immunities, but that power stops cold where federal law begins. You just can't build a legal wall around your state to keep federal rights out. The very fact that a principle this fundamental had to be slapped down by the Supreme Court, well, it leaves us with one final, kind of unsettling question. If something as basic as the Supremacy Clause is being challenged, what other long-settled legal ideas might be on the chopping block next? And as always, a final reminder. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This is not legal advice,